Cleveland's home of several first black mayor of a major city, first black baseball manager in Major League Baseball, first black American League Baseball player, Larry Doby. But nobody, when they mention all that, they'll never mention Cheryl White. It's another Cleveland first black female jockey. And every time she's left out.
Cheryl White made history right here at Thistledown in 1971. She rode her first race at 17 years old, becoming America's first black female jockey. But her brother believes her name, her achievements have been suppressed in part because of racism and sexism. But now her family is sharing her legacy through literature, art, film, and the sport. Our Nyorkor telling us about this Cleveland Black history legend in part 1 of her story.
Moving along strongly out on the lead with Sticks in second. Top Flight's being hard ridden on the outside. Still has lead. Sticks is now coming up on the outside. And HM Spacer, NBR Secret Cash and Sticks. NBR Secret Cash.
July 25th, 1992 at Los Alamitos Racecourse in Cypress, California. Jockey Cheryl White captured her final trophy and quietly retired from horse racing with more than 750 career wins. She was at the top of her game, setting records, but her brother Raymond White Jr. says hardly anyone knew it.
She didn't think of herself as a big deal. She had her friends, she wanted to ride races, be a jockey, and do her job, and she didn't brag about herself.
But she was a trailblazer, the first licensed black female jockey in America. Cheryl was born into a horse family and raised on a 400-acre horse farm in Rome Township, Ohio. Her father, Raymond White Sr., was a well-known and accomplished thoroughbred trainer, and her mother, Doris Jean Gorski, owned several racehorses. Under her father's tutelage, Cheryl rode her first race at Thistledown Racino in 1971. She was 17 years old, 5'3", 107 pounds, and sat astride her father's horse, Ace Reward. Raymond Jr. was 9 years old and says he'll never forget.
It was packed with reporters. You couldn't see my sister. You couldn't see my dad. They were 5, 6 deep around the stall, the paddock stall. So there was just huge crowd. Had there been no pre-publicity, Cheryl would have rode her first race with no fanfare. Nobody would have known, nobody would have came out. But here she was, 17 years old, riding her first race in front of the equivalent of a rookie baseball player walking out to a sold-out crowd. And she never blinked an eye. She never blinked an eye. You would have never known if she was nervous. You'd have never known it.
Do you think Cheryl knew at that time, at that young age, the magnitude of that moment?
She did, but kind of just brushed it off. She was humble. She didn't think of herself as that big of a deal.
Cheryl won her first race September 2nd, 1971 at Waterford Park in New Cumberland, West Virginia. The young girl broke barriers, making headlines, receiving accolades from around the globe, but yet and still, throughout her storied career, Cheryl White remained vastly unknown. Raymond Jr. tells me his sister never discussed it at the time, but he later learned some of what troubled her.
The sexism thing was huge. I mean, female jockeys were being yelled at, told to go home, go cook some eggs in the kitchen, make breakfast. What are you doing out here? Eventually, she stopped talking about those things. If you see later on interviews with her, she was basically like, I haven't faced any real racism or sexism. It was almost like somebody told her to be quiet.
After winning her last race in 1992, Cheryl became an accredited racing official and made a career out of it.
She went to California. She found a niche out there, and she got comfortable and stayed out there.
Cheryl White died of a heart attack in 2019 at the age of 65. Now her family is beating the path where she left off and trying to restake her place in horse racing glory.
Wow, what an incredible story. Thank you to Nyorkor for sharing it with us. And there is so much more to share about Cheryl White. We're not done yet. You can watch part 2 of this story coming up on 19 News at 5 o'clock.
Her place in history, she's been excluded from too many things. She's been mistaken.
Cheryl White broke barriers at Thistledown when she rode her first race back in 1971. She went on to become America's first black female jockey, but her brother says she's still vastly unknown, even though she achieved. Now, earlier we showed you how Cheryl White went on to win more than 750 races throughout her career. She passed away back in 2019.
And now her family working to continue her legacy. Nyorkor shares part 2 of this Cleveland Black History legend.
In 2021, Raymond Jr. got a call from New York Times reporter Sarah Maslanier, who wanted to know more about his sister, Cheryl.
Sarah contacted me. I said, yeah, by the way, we have a race in Cheryl's name in 3 days. And she said, well, can I come to it? I said, yeah. So she came to it, and she brought a photographer, and the rest is kind of history. We're kind of connected. It was an instant bond, instant connection. And we called her family right from the beginning.
So I heard about her story, and I was really stunned that me, again, this big horse nerd, didn't know about it. I found this 1971 magazine with this beautiful girl beaming from a horse. It said, "Teenage girl breaks barriers on the track." And how could I not know her? That was painful to me. How could it be moldering on eBay and not, in the Hall of Fame where she belongs?
Maslanier says Cheryl was an athlete in a sport that has been slow and late to fully celebrate the contributions of blacks and women. So she and Cheryl's family joined to set the record. Raymond Jr. and Maslanier co-authored a children's book released last year in September, The Jockey and Her Horse, inspired by Cheryl White.
I'm an investigative reporter, and so I sat down and interviewed Raymond deeply and pulled these threads out of him about Cheryl's life. And it's important to note that it is a work of fiction based in fact, because we wanted to tell people the story of the erased larger legacy of that enslaved history of the sport. So we incorporated that into the story. So Cheryl, our character, goes on a journey of discovery herself and learns about this erased legacy. And that does fit true to her narrative because she didn't know. She didn't know she was on the shoulders of greatness.
Raymond Jr. and the family also created the Cheryl White Project to, quote, ensure that the legacy of America's first black female jockey doesn't get lost to bygone memories. They're using the book to promote literacy in schools and at the same time share Cheryl's story to encourage others. Raymond Jr. and Maslanier say the story of how Cheryl White galloped into history as the first black female jockey will no longer be forgotten.
I like to say that we didn't write this book for kids to necessarily become jockeys or get into horse racing, which we wouldn't mind seeing that happen. But we want them to be able to, reach their goals. Anything's possible if you really want to do it. Cheryl wanted to be a jockey.
Reporting in Cleveland,
The time was right. And so we've done a lot, and we're not done. So that's the whole thing. We're not done, we're not done, we're not done.
Nyorkor, 19 News.
Incredible story. Now, to learn more about Cheryl White and the Cheryl White Project, click on Cleveland19.com. There you'll see the entire story and more photos as we continue to celebrate Black History Month here at 19 News.